The night it happened, I wasn't looking for company. I was just sitting alone in my small apartment, the rain tapping gently on the window, the TV flickering quietly in the background. Life had been simple, almost too simple since my divorce 2 years ago. My world had narrowed down to work, my 9-year-old son, Ethan, and the quiet hum of lonely evenings that stretched too long. I didn't expect a random conversation with a woman I barely knew to change everything. But sometimes life has a strange way of testing how much space your heart still has left for someone new. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unexpected beauty of human connection, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more heart-touching stories like this one. Her name was Maya. I'd met her only a few weeks earlier through a community outreach event where volunteers served food at a local shelter. She wasn't like most people I knew, quiet but kind, with this weary calmness in her eyes, as if she had seen too much of life too early. There was something broken yet beautiful about her presence. She laughed softly, listened deeply, and spoke little about herself. I noticed the small tremor in her hands when she poured soup into bowls, or how she looked at people, not with pity, but with quiet understanding. That night after the event ended, we sat on the curb eating leftover sandwiches. I joked, "You should move in with me. Save me from these quiet nights." It was said lightly, just something to make her smile, and she did smile briefly, though her eyes seemed to linger a bit too long on mine. The next day, around noon, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to see Maya standing there, soaked from the rain, a small duffel bag over her shoulder. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Hope there's room." I froze. The joke had turned into something real, too real. For a long moment I just stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or worry. But when I looked closer, I saw it. Redness around her eyes, exhaustion, and something that looked like fear. Without another thought, I stepped aside and said, "There's always room." That was how it began. At first it felt strange, this quiet woman living in my small 2-bedroom apartment. Ethan was curious, of course. He asked if Maya was a friend, and I told him yes. She slept in the small guest room, barely unpacking, keeping her few belongings tucked neatly in a corner. She helped with dishes, folded laundry, and offered to cook, though I often caught her skipping meals herself. She laughed when Ethan told his silly jokes, and sometimes she'd hum softly while washing dishes, old songs that sounded like they carried 100 stories inside them. Over the days that followed, little pieces of her life began to surface. She'd been working at a small cafe until it shut down without warning. The landlord of her old apartment had kicked her out after she fell behind on rent. She had no family nearby, and the few friends she'd trusted had drifted away when she needed the most. She had been living out of her car before volunteering at the shelter that night. I didn't know what made her come to my door, but part of me felt it wasn't just desperation. It was trust, and I couldn't betray that. Weeks passed. The rhythm of life slowly began to change. For the first time in a long time, laughter started returning to the apartment. Ethan adored her. He'd draw her pictures and leave them on her door, calling her Miss Maya. She helped him with homework, taught him how to make paper cranes. And once, when he had a nightmare, she sat beside his bed telling him stories until he fell asleep again. Watching her like that stirred something inside me, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Yet beneath her gentle smile I could sense a shadow. Some nights I'd hear her crying quietly in her room, muffling the sound under a pillow. I never asked. Sometimes silence is kinder than questions. One Friday evening after dinner, I found her sitting on the balcony, staring into the distance. The city lights flickered below, and her eyes shimmered faintly in the glow. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think people only helped others when they wanted something back. You proved me wrong." I told her it wasn't about proving anything. "Maybe," she whispered, "but you gave me something I didn't think I deserved. A place to just exist." Her voice cracked a little at that word, exist. It struck me hard because I knew what it meant to feel invisible, to live day after day without being seen. Things weren't easy financially. Supporting Ethan alone was already tough. Having another person meant stretching every dollar a little thinner. I took extra shifts at work, sometimes coming home long after midnight. Still, every time I saw Maya waiting up offering me a cup of tea, I felt like maybe the exhaustion was worth it. She started looking for jobs, going to interviews, even doing odd cleaning work for neighbors. Bit by bit, life was piecing itself together again for both of us. But then came the day that tested everything. It was a Wednesday morning. I came home from work early and found two men standing near the apartment building, one of them holding a clipboard. They were from a collection agency. Maya's name was on their list. Apparently, she had old medical debt she'd never been able to pay. They mentioned something about tracking her through her social security information. My stomach sank. When I went inside, I found Maya sitting on the floor, her hands trembling, an unopened letter beside her. She looked at me, her eyes filled with shame. "I didn't mean for this to follow me here," she said. I thought I could start over. I didn't know what to say. For a moment, anger flashed at the unfairness of it all, at how the world punishes people already broken. But then I saw her face, tired, scared, defeated. I sat down beside her and said, "We'll figure it out." Together, she looked at me like she didn't believe it at first, and then tears began to fall. I held her, and for a while neither of us spoke. The following weeks were a blur of challenges. Bills piled up. I had to borrow money from co-workers just to keep things afloat. Maya tried to move out, insisting she didn't want to be a burden. But Ethan refused to let her go. "She's family," he said. In that innocent way children have of seeing the truth adults try to hide. Those words broke her completely. She stayed, though she worked twice as hard, taking any job she could find. Cleaning, babysitting, even sewing for a local shop late into the night. I often found her asleep at the table, her head resting beside spools of thread. And then slowly something beautiful began to happen. The cafe she used to work for reopened under new management, and they offered her a job this time as a supervisor. She was hesitant at first, afraid of failing again, but I encouraged her. "You deserve this." I told her, "You've earned it." Seeing her put on that uniform again, standing a little taller, made me realize how much she'd grown, not just into her life, but into herself. Months passed and the house began to feel different, alive. We'd cook together, watch old movies with Ethan, and sometimes after he'd gone to bed, we'd sit quietly sipping tea, talking about everything and nothing. One night she said, "Do you ever regret letting me stay?" I looked at her for a long moment and said no, because I didn't just give you a place to stay, you gave us one too. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes, and whispered, "Maybe some people come into your life to remind you what home really means." Winter came. The first snow of the year fell quietly, dusting the streets like a soft blanket. I watched through the window as Maya and Ethan built a small snowman on the lawn, both laughing like children. I took a photo of them, her eyes bright, her smile wide, his hands covered in snow. In that moment, I realized the loneliness that once haunted these walls was gone. In its place was something fragile yet strong hope. But life in its unpredictable way tested us once more. Maya got a call one morning. Her arranged father, who she hadn't spoken to in years, was in the hospital. She'd run away from home at 16 after years of emotional neglect. "I don't know if I can face him," she said, her hands trembling. I told her she should go, not for him but for herself. She went, and for 3 days I heard nothing. On the 4th day she returned, her face pale but peaceful. "He's gone," she said softly. "But he said he was proud of me." Then she looked at me and whispered, "Maybe forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it frees the heart." I didn't know what to say, so I just held her close, feeling the quiet ache between us. From that day on, things were different, lighter, more real. She didn't just live with us anymore. She belonged. The woman who had once stood on my doorstep, soaked and lost, had found her place again. Not through pity, but through love, patience, and second chances. Months later, on an ordinary evening, she looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You know, when you joked about me moving in, I never thought it'd lead to this." I smiled and replied, "Neither did I." Ethan laughed, asking, "What if it was meant to be?" And maybe it was, because sometimes the smallest, most accidental moments, an offhand joke, a rainy night, stranger's knock can change everything. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone who believes that kindness still matters, and that every soul deserves a second chance. Before you go, I'd love to hear in the comments, have you ever helped someone who ended up changing your life too? 'Cause maybe, just maybe, that's what life is all about. Not who we save, but who we let.